Have you ever noticed how retirement always seems to come down to one number? 1 million, 2 million, maybe even more. And once that number gets into your head, it starts to feel like a rule, like you're not allowed to stop until you hit it. I've seen this happen over and over again. People will tell themselves, I just need to reach that number. And then quietly, they raise it because the earlier you want to retire, the bigger it needs to be. At least, that's what most people believe. But here's where things get interesting. What if that number isn't wrong, just incomplete? What if the real issue isn't how much you have, but how rigid your plan is? I'm Clara Morgan, and today I want to show you something that could change how you think about retirement completely. If you're willing to make just one shift, you may not need as much as you think. Not a little less, possibly half. Let's start with the assumption most people never question, that your retirement life will cost almost the same as your life today. It sounds reasonable, but it quietly leads you to a much bigger number than you may actually need. And the truth is, most people never stop to think about how life actually changes when work ends. Think about your current life. Where does your money go? Housing, transportation, work-related expenses, saving itself, day-to-day convenience costs you never really notice. Now imagine removing just one layer. Work. No commute, no daily transport costs, no work clothes, no rushed lunch orders or takeout because you're tired, no extra fees just to make life work around a schedule. That alone changes more than people expect. And that's just one example. There's someone I spoke to recently, Daniel. He was convinced he needed around 2 million to retire. He did everything right, saved consistently, stayed disciplined, but when we slowed things down and looked at his future lifestyle, something shifted. His mortgage would be paid off. He planned to stay local, reducing travel costs. He had more time to manage his spending, and his monthly expenses dropped by nearly 40%. Not because he was cutting back hard, but because his life was simply different. Suddenly, his required number wasn't 2 million anymore. It was closer to 1.2 million. That's a huge difference, and it all came from understanding real-life adjustments. And this is where the math starts to shift. There's a common guideline in retirement planning. For every $100,000 invested, you might safely withdraw around $4,000 per year. It's simple, it feels safe, but it assumes something very rigid. So if you think you need $80,000 a year, you're aiming for about 2 million. But if your real spending is closer to 50,000, now the number drops to around 1.25 million. That's not a small difference. That's years of extra work removed. And even that doesn't capture the full picture. Here's where most retirement advice falls short. It assumes that your spending will be fixed, that your life will stay exactly the same year after year. And that's simply not true. Real life adjusts. When markets drop, you don't keep spending exactly the same. You delay a big trip. You pause something optional. You make small changes. Not because you planned it perfectly, but because it's human. This is called flexible spending, and it's one of the most overlooked ideas in retirement planning because it's not clean. It doesn't fit into a simple formula. It can't be printed on a headline. Most financial advice avoids this. It's easier to say, save more, aim higher, be safe, and on the surface, that sounds responsible. But here's the hidden cost. You might end up working longer than you need to, delaying a life you're already financially ready for, all because your plan assumes you'll never adjust. And here's the psychological part. We don't just want enough. We want certainty. We want guarantees. And that desire for certainty often pushes people towards bigger numbers than they actually need. It whispers things like, what if something goes wrong? What if I live longer than expected? What if I missed something? And suddenly, you're trapped by fear. But certainty in retirement doesn't come from having the biggest number possible. It comes from understanding your flexibility, because life isn't fixed and your spending isn't fixed. Let's dig into an example. Imagine two retirees. One follows a strict rule. They withdraw the same amount every year, no matter what the market does. The other adjusts. When the market is strong, they spend a bit more. When it's weak, they pull back slightly. Over time, something interesting happens. The flexible approach often needs less money up front, and in many cases, it actually reduces long-term risk because you're not forcing your portfolio to support the same pressure every single year. It's subtle, but it's powerful. Here's another point most people overlook. Your retirement lifestyle isn't static. You don't suddenly become the same person with the same habits as you are now. You have more time, more control, and time is your most powerful asset. You cook more, you plan more, you think before spending. You stop paying for convenience because you now have the space to handle things yourself. It's a change in behavior that most people never account for. And that's why retirement numbers in the media are often misleading. They look safe on paper, they feel neat, but they're incomplete. They ignore human adaptability. They ignore how life actually changes. So instead of asking, how much do I need to retire? Ask a different question. What does my real life in retirement look like? Not the ideal version, the normal one. What do you actually spend? What disappears naturally? What adjusts on its own? Because when you answer that honestly, your number becomes clearer and often smaller. And here's the quiet realization. You may not be behind. You may not be underprepared. You may just be using the wrong model. Retirement isn't about hitting a perfect number. It's about understanding how your life works when you finally have control over your time. And once you see that, you stop chasing a number blindly. You start making decisions with clarity. And for some people, that's the moment they realize they were already closer than they thought. Let me tell you one more story. I spoke to a woman named Sarah. She had been saving aggressively her whole life. 2 kids, full-time work, mortgage paid down but not gone yet. She thought she needed about $2.5 million to retire comfortably. When we went line by line through her projected lifestyle, it was shocking. Her biggest expenses would disappear. Mortgage, commuting, daily convenience costs. She didn't need to spend as much on food because she would be cooking at home more. She could stay local, reducing travel costs, and she would finally have the time to make intentional spending decisions. Her number dropped to just over $1 million, half of what she thought she needed. That's not luck. That's clarity. And clarity is what most people miss, because the default story is fear. Fear tells you need more. Bigger is safer. Never stop until you hit it. But the truth is, you don't need to be perfect. You just need to be aware. You just need to be flexible. And that changes everything. So here's what I want you to take away today. Step 1. Stop obsessing over a giant fixed number. Step 2. Map out your real retirement life. Step 3. Identify the natural adjustments you can make. Step 4. Build your number based on reality, not fear or a rigid formula. When you do that, you'll see something amazing. You don't need to sacrifice decades of life to hit an arbitrary target. You may already be closer than you think. And once that realization hits, you can finally make decisions with confidence. Not out of fear, not out of pressure, but from clarity. Because retirement isn't a number, it's a life. And that life starts the moment you understand it. Pause for a moment and really think about it. What does your real retirement look like? How much flexibility do you have? Where could you adjust naturally? Because the answers are often smaller and far more achievable than the numbers the headlines keep shouting at you. And that's where the biggest shift happens. It's not in your portfolio, it's in your thinking. Once you see this clearly, everything changes. Retirement doesn't have to be a distant dream. It doesn't have to be a mountain of money you're terrified of missing. It can start now, with clarity and the confidence that comes from understanding your life, your spending, and your adaptability. So the real question isn't, how much do I need? It's, am I solving the right problem? And once you answer that, you might just realize you are already closer than you thought all along. This is retirement the way it really works. Flexible, adaptable, human. Not rigid, not scary, just life, but with time finally on your side. If you pause for a second after hearing this, that's a good sign. It means your perspective is shifting, and perspective is where better decisions begin. That's the path to a retirement that feels possible, peaceful, and truly yours.